Good morning. My name is Evelyn Diaz, and I'm the president of Heartland Alliance. It is a privilege to welcome you to our annual event this year to highlight the work of our courageous organization that advances human rights and social justice each and every day. We know that our vision to achieve equity and opportunity for all is only achievable when we work together. So I'm grateful to our board of directors, the 1,400 human rights workers that constitute the Heartland Alliance team, our funders, and all of the sponsors of today's event, including Assurance, Bernstein, Crown Family Philanthropies, and Exelon, as well as the many other advocates who support our work. When so many people around the world and in our home city are facing instability and uncertainty about their housing, income, safety, health, and legal status, I am proud to share that Heartland Alliance last year led in protecting people experiencing homelessness by administering more than 3,000 COVID vaccines in 50 Chicago shelters. We resettled nearly 400 Afghan evacuees and provided mental health services to more than 500 survivors of torture. And we provided affordable housing through our new 37th Street school apartments and plan to soon break ground on a major new development in the Austin community. This is just a tiny fraction of what our entire alliance is doing. Today, we're going to home in on our community violence intervention work. 5 years ago, at this event, we announced the launch of READI Chicago, a program designed to engage men at the highest risk of gun violence involvement and offer them a 2-year full-time opportunity involving cognitive behavioral therapy, a job, and coaching. To achieve this and do it at scale, we partnered with several community-based organizations, including Centers for New Horizons, the Institute for Nonviolence Chicago, UCAN, and the North Lawndale Employment Network. We also partnered with the University of Chicago Crime Lab and Inclusive Economy Lab to conduct a rigorous evaluation of READI's impact on shootings and homicides. Today, 5 years later, we have evaluation results and a whole lot of learning under our belts that we want to share. I'm joined by an esteemed panel of READI Chicago partners who've not only been on the front lines of operating and studying READI, but who've dedicated their careers to creating opportunities for people who've been marginalized and finding solutions to end community violence. Monica Bott is Senior Research Director at the University of Chicago Crime Lab and Education Lab. She oversees several large-scale randomized control trials and is the principal investigator on a number of high-profile studies, including READI Chicago. She's a former Fulbright scholar and holds a PhD from the University of Michigan and master's and bachelor's degrees from Vanderbilt University. Brenda Palms-Barber is CEO of the North Lawndale Employment Network, an urban workforce development agency that is also a READI Chicago employment partner. Under her leadership, NLEN has grown tremendously and now serves more than 2,500 people annually. She's the CEO of Sweet Beginnings and founder of Be Love Cafe. Brenda is a graduate of Harvard's Nonprofit Management Program and the Chicago Urban League's Entrepreneurship Program, and she holds a master's degree in nonprofit management from the Spertus Institute in Chicago. And Dr. Chico Tillman is the executive director of READI Chicago. He's a senior research fellow at the University of Chicago Urban Labs and the former executive director of the YMCA of Metro Chicago's Youth Safety and Violence Prevention Program. He holds a PhD from UIC, a master's degree from Northeastern Illinois University, and is a veteran of the Illinois Air National Guard. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We have lots to discuss, and I want to remind our audience to submit their questions online for our Q&A portion later in the program. So to set the stage for our discussion, we want you to meet one of our READI Chicago participants, Jaquay Carr. to hear what READI has meant for him.
So the Austin community, it's a rough one. It has its good parts and its bad parts. Well, for the most part, the community engages each other, and we pretty much talk a lot. But then you have the violence, and that pretty much offsets everything else. You just didn't know if the next day was coming. I've had times where I wanted to change before coming to READI. And it just, my mindset then wouldn't allow me to actually change, because you think like, people don't want to let you change, or, you just nervous about what comes with the change. They have this cognitive behavioral training, this cognitive behavioral therapy. And we spend time just, kind of talking about our real thoughts and what we really feel and what we really wanted to do with our lives. And that ultimately led to the real change. I think one of the greatest components was learning how to deal with your emotions, learning how to respond, not being so quick to respond off of emotion. Like we broke it down into different sections, and collectively they transformed the mind. Since READI, a lot's changed. I've focused on more of my strengths. They've actually taken me places. I've actually been doing a lot better in life with parenting and, just with being a man. It's actually changing my neighborhood, if I'm being honest. Though the people that I was connected with were pretty much the troublemakers, and they watched my change, and a lot of them decided that they wanted to change. And it's almost like a trickle-down effect, so it keeps happening. It keeps happening, and we just keep bringing more people on to the right sides. They're making so many different resources available for people who want jobs but don't know how to go about getting them, or people who are re-entering re-entering society from prison, or just a bunch of different things. They extend hands. They make sure that nobody's really left behind. If you want it, it's here and it's available. That we can create more opportunities, because it's easy to say, hey, well, you guys don't need to be doing that. They pretty much already know that they don't need to be doing it. You have to kind of offer a solution, because it's hard to say, okay, well, you shouldn't do that if that's what's feeding their families, if you can't offer another solution.
What's remarkable about Jaquay's experience and the 900 other men who participated in READI over the past 5 years is that he showed up and kept showing up for this program and for himself, despite a history of deep-seated trauma and loss caused by experiencing violence at unimaginable levels over the course of his life. When we describe the men of READI Chicago, we talk about them as being at the highest risk of violence involvement. Monica, can you help us understand what it means for someone to be at the highest risk of gun violence involvement in Chicago?
Of course, and thank you for the opportunity to answer this question and for being here to talk about this important program. So the men in READI are different from men who might have been served by other community violence prevention programs in the past. We know, and we know from the research that we've been doing, that men in READI are 54 times more likely to be shot and killed than the average Chicagoan. 54 times more likely to be shot and killed. What we also know is that even within a neighborhood, compared to their peers of the same age, living in the same place, they are 2 to 3 times more likely to be shot and killed within 18 months. And so one of the things that READI set out to do very early on was to be hyper-focused and targeted at men who are directly involved in violence, either as a perpetrator or as a victim. And what we see is that targeting that READI set out to accomplish, which had never really been done before, is being done. And I think this is important for two reasons. First, it allows us to not paint such a broad brush to indicate that all members of a community might be experiencing the same levels of violence. And so we're able to demonstrate that even within communities who are bearing the brunt of gun violence, there is heterogeneity and people are having different experiences, and we're able to honor that. The second reason that that's really important is we're able to differentiate and take the most intensive interventions and offer them to the people who might be able to benefit most or who might need it most. And that's something that we've been able to learn a lot through the READI Chicago program.
Chico and Brenda, looking beyond the statistics then of what it means to be at the highest risk, what can you tell us about what you've observed about the men who share this risk profile?
Well, thank you, Evelyn, for allowing me to be here. And when you think about some of the young men that live in these communities, they're faced with trying to subscribe to hypermasculinity, trying to live in a way where they are constantly battling anxiety, constantly trying to figure out how to get to the program and how to make it home. And if you think about, many institutions have let them down, like schools, other spaces, community centers in the neighborhood, because many of these individuals live in a space that's constantly dealing with complex trauma, constantly dealing with shootings, almost in a combat zone. If you think about it, in many of these communities, there's a shooting almost every day. So that's in the back of their psyche, how to survive in this community without being victimized or their family being victimized. So that's the life of these individuals at the highest risk.
I agree, Evelyn and Chico, with what your comments are. You know, the North Lawndale Employment Network, we thought we were so ready for READI 5 years ago. And we thought we were ready because of our job readiness and reentry program, U-Turn Permitted. And we assumed that the men that we would see through READI would be similar. And I think you could say in many ways there are some similarities, but it's our U-Turn Permitted folks are perhaps READI individuals like 20 years later, right? And as Chico described, the people that we see today are young men who have learned how to navigate in communities that are deeply and chronically challenged by poverty. And so that means that they're able to survive, you know, in many of the ways that Chico just listed. And that sort of allows them to create a toolkit, if you will, that sometimes has to be unlearned. Mm-hmm. And as Jaquay said, we have to fill them with new tools for their toolbox. We see individuals who don't have the kind of support systems that support that transformation. We see people, young men who are really battling basics like depression and anxiety, ADHD. Many of them have not been formally diagnosed. And I think there's a lot of insecurity around their future, mm-hmm. because they know, as you said, there's a shooting every day in the neighborhood. But many of these guys, unfortunately, I think only 19% have actually completed their high school education, I think at sophomore level. So they don't have high school educations or GEDs. And so that makes you even more anxious about your future. So these are the kind of folks that we see coming through our doors, but we are so grateful for our partnerships. You know, I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that we're able to connect with them with love and care, and we see you. And that is a huge difference between the people that we have served and the need that these young men need.
I think that's absolutely right, Brenda. That's the difference maker, is this kind of what Chico was earlier talking about as kindness and love that they experience in the program. So thank you all for helping to paint that picture. These are not men who our institutions have served well, even in the human services sector, we have to say. You all have really been pioneers in how to reach and serve a segment of the population that is key if we're going to reduce shootings and homicides in Chicago. So the men in READI Chicago are referred to the program in one of three ways. From a risk list that's generated by the University of Chicago Crime Lab, from referrals from our community-based partners, and from referrals from jail and prison administrators. Our next video features a remarkable READI Chicago staff member, READI Allah, who's been able to leverage his similar life experiences to support READI participants from each of these referral pathways.
I started working with the Cook County Jail and the sheriff's anti-violence efforts. Going inside of the county jail has really been a real blessing for me, and working with those young men in the SAVE program, which are kind of first time or second time gun offenders, recruiting out of the SAVE program and entering them right into the READI program, providing them kind of the same wraparound services while they're inside of Cook County Jail, and allowing them to get right out and to come into the program. For the partners that READI partner up with, they have a unique role, one into implementing either some type of outreach service, where that's going in and kind of be the first to make contact with our participants, and then others, the other partners, they actually service our participants by giving them cognitive behavior therapy, employment skills, and things of that nature. And that is really, without those partners, we wouldn't be able to really have a successful model. It's kind of giving a participant an entire team, an entire village to work with, and each step prepares you for the next. This participant calls me once a month to thank me and thank READI for helping him and his family really be in a position where now he's had a launching pad to his success. He was fresh out of prison after doing about 8 years for a violent crime, and he was probably 4 or 5 months out of prison, not really knowing where to go. And he really had some challenges, and READI came through for him. Currently, I am the proud reentry coordinator for READI Chicago. I kind of coordinate all the reentry pathways into READI, which is only one of the pathways that you get into READI as an outreach worker, because I myself was on parole when I first got this job after serving 22 and a half years in prison. And so you talk about capacity building, there's no greater example of building capacity when you can hire the participant that you want served. Because the people that are closest to the problem are going to have the best answers. And as long as we keep hiring people that are closer to the problem, they will work passionately to make sure that a resolution is being implemented. We understand that human rights just don't extend to a certain group of people, that human rights extend to all people of all colors and all backgrounds. And even if you have a background that has, in which you have served your time and you have paid your debt to society, then you should definitely be given a fair shot at employment. And I believe that is a very strong value to have, fairness.
It's inspiring to watch READI emerge as an important and influential leader in this field. There are lots of stories of men in the program who have incredible gifts and talents that have never gotten a chance to blossom until they were given the opportunity of READI Chicago. So let's talk about the economic opportunity that READI participants get, and I'm talking about jobs. And we know that having access to employment opportunities is critical for long-term success. And READI Chicago teams up with trusted employment partners like the North Lawndale Employment Network to provide 12 months of paid transitional employment to READI participants. The jobs include community revitalization, construction training, and working with a social enterprise partner to gain manufacturing experience. And so far, READI Chicago has contributed $10 million directly to the pockets of READI participants. Brenda, you and NLEN have been helping people get job experience, job skills, and land good-paying jobs for decades through your U-Turn program. You courageously raised your hand to work with a new population of men through READI. So what has been the same? What's been different about serving the men of READI, and why does investing in this particular workforce matter?
You know, such a good question. As I thought about it, I think that first of all, the difference, and I mentioned this earlier, is that these young men have just far more complicated and severe challenges that they have to face. And they need a comprehensive approach to helping build them. In addition to traditional skills and work readiness, I think that the cognitive-based therapy that we use helps to build skills and tools to manage difficult situations. But at the very core, from my perspective, we have to spend a lot of time helping people rebuild a healthy sense of their self-worth and their value. And I think that the length of time that we've been afforded through READI gives us that opportunity to have trusting, thoughtful, respectful relationships. And we can put up a mirror and say, this is who you are. What do you want to be? And you can dream. I think because so many folks don't understand what their pathways to advancement might be, READI does that. READI shows you a pathway forward that you may not have been aware of. So I think that that's part of the difference, and one of the ways that we're preparing people for work. It certainly has to be far beyond the traditional kinds of job readiness programs that we offer, but there has to be this comprehensive approach. You know, the other piece, and I believe that Chico mentioned this, is, you know, our first chance system, unfortunately, doesn't include the men and women that the men that we're serving through READI. And I believe that the first chance system, our educational system, actually fails too many of our young people who don't get proper diagnosis for learning disabilities that they may have. There's a reason why so many of the men that we're working with haven't attained a high school education. And it isn't because they don't want one. It's because there are undiagnosed or unresourced challenges that they face. And so I think that we really have a responsibility to take a look at that system. But then that experience, I think, creates distrust for other systems. And I think that's another one of the reasons why, you know, READI works, because it's relationship-based. It's not institutional driven, right? And so when we talk about jobs, we love that so many of the READI folks are actually hired through our social enterprise Sweet Beginnings. And I think social enterprises and earn and learn models are fundamental. They are fundamental for reintroducing traditional work to people who have not. I talked to my team the other day and I said, how many of our READI participants have actually had traditional work before they've come to us? And it was like less than 10% had actually had formal jobs. I'm not sure if that's consistent with your knowledge as well, Monica, but that's stunning. And so these kinds of opportunities where they can learn to work habits, develop work ethic in a supportive environment gives them the launching pad to be successful in other employment. And that's what's exciting for us, is that through this experience, we've seen them be very successful and hold that job down in other sectors.
I really love this idea of not waiting to the second chance system to deliver the CBT and those kinds of what we traditionally refer to as soft skills that are really vital for success in the workplace that we often take for granted.
That's right.
Let's move on. Monica, I'd really like to talk about the effectiveness of READI Chicago in reducing shootings and homicides. You just conducted a long-term evaluation of READI Chicago. What are the outcomes and how cost-effective is the approach?
It's a great question. So we talked a little bit earlier about how this population of men is different from populations of men who social service agencies might have been serving before. So Brenda talked a lot about how the U-Turn program has been serving men for decades, and so they thought they were ready, and this population of men is a little bit different in terms of their past experiences and histories. And we see that in the data as well. So we see that about a third of men have been shot before. On average, the men have about 17 arrests, 5 felony arrests. And so they have extensive involvement in the criminal justice system, extensive number of arrests, and also high rates of victimization. So for the guys in the READI program, about 11 out of 100 will be shot or killed over an 18-month period, which is staggering. It is truly unfathomable. So the question on everyone's mind is, does READI work to reduce that staggeringly high rate of violence victimization? And what we see is for men who are offered READI compared to men who had the advantage and sort of opportunity to participate in other kinds of services, everything else that existed prior to READI. We did a randomized control trial of about 2,500 men, and we see about a 19% reduction in shooting and homicide victimizations and a 63% reduction in shooting and homicide arrests. We also see kind of a slight increase, but statistically significant, in other types of serious violent crimes. What's really important is that we would not have known the answers to the question that you just posed if we hadn't set it up like this. And the reason we were able to is, unfortunately, we had far more men who could benefit from READI services than READI was able to serve. And I think what's really important about this evidence and these results is that on average, we do see some indications of reductions in victimization and arrests for shooting and homicides. But what's really, I think, more important to me is for the community referral pathways. There's 3 referral pathways where you can go into READI. So REALITY talked about the reentry pathway, there's a risk assessment pathway, and then there's community referrals through street outreach. For that pathway of men, we actually see statistically significant reductions of up to 79% in shooting and homicide arrests. And so that's really important evidence. Is that definitive evidence across the board? No, but I think one really important thing for us to remember is that science is inherently conservative, and so we're going to want to know at conventional levels of statistical significance, are we going to see this result over and over again? And we can have that debate, and we should do this study again, but what's really important is that you all as policymakers and as practitioners need to be making decisions now. And in my view, this is some of the most important evidence that we see. And so for every participant that READI serves, we see hundreds of thousands of dollars of cost savings in terms of the cost benefit and the cost effectiveness of this program. And I think that's really important and really important evidence that has been generated in service of the policy conversation that's going on right now.
So really, really promising. And Chico, just as a follow-up on this topic, what are some of your thoughts on how to prioritize investments to see the greatest impact?
I think one of the things that we highlighted was really around kindness and love, but understanding the humanistic part of engaging these individuals where we can identify that we're dealing with individuals that have been neglected, victimized, and live in a cycle of multiple trauma. So CBI is critical. CBI, first, getting these individuals to understand that they aren't the sum total of their experiences. Mm-hmm. That's critical because a lot of people are responding from a space where I've been victimized my whole life and I have to portray or wear this mask in order to survive in this community, and nobody cares because every door I ever tried to open, I've been rejected. So what CBI does is change the way not only how they think about themselves, but how they see the world and the possibilities that lie ahead. And that's critical. So now when they see other people, they're more likely to engage them through a human lens as opposed to the high risk looking at them as ops. They can humanize other people and have conversations with people where historically there was violence on both sides. And what READI has done through CBI is allow them to pause and be able to think through this situation and understand that this situation is, guess what? Just this situation. It's not based upon all the historical trauma that I experienced my entire life. And I shouldn't respond based upon my past experience, but based on the situation that's in front of me. And if you think about the landscape of violence prevention across the country, the missing gap has always been behavior modification. It was built upon street intervention and outreach, but we have for years been grappling with, after we engage these individuals, how do we get them to change? Sadly, we were relying on this maturation process that people will age out or just change on their own or just through exposure. But what I love about READI is the intentionality to provide these individuals with a toolkit we call CAD, but the world calls CBI or CBT, to be able to not only change in the moment where they're in programming, but be empowered to take it out to the community and be a champion of CBI to their peers.
That's great. As we're talking about investments, I want to mention that the Chicago philanthropic community has been an incredible advocate for our work, and none of this would be possible without their support. Let's take a look at this clip from our supporters at the Partnership for Safe and Peaceful Communities and Crown Family Philanthropies to hear more about why they chose to support READI Chicago.
We believe it is critical for Chicago to invest in reducing gun violence so that every neighborhood, every block, and every community member can live in peace and thrive. The READI program is one of the change makers driving this vision forward, and we are privileged to support its work. It is powerful to see how READI values and respects its program participants as individuals with their own dreams and goals, and how it draws on strong research and evidence to help participants achieve success on their own terms. We're also energized by Heartland's commitment to working in true partnership with nonprofits, community leaders, and funders to address gun violence both holistically and at its roots.
The Partnership for Safe and Peaceful Communities, or PSPC, is a coalition of more than 50 foundations and other funders that are all working together to identify and support community-led, evidence-based solutions for addressing gun violence in Chicago.
So PSPC allows members to really invest in the things that are most meaningful to them, while having those solutions be both based in the best evidence that we have at the moment, and also being driven by community and what we know works. So READI exemplifies this, leveraging its relationships both with the University of Chicago and the Crime Lab, and also grassroots community leaders who have lived experience in the areas of community safety and gun violence.
Philanthropy tends to have some of the more flexible structure of funding that is available to our community partners, which lets us do really innovative new things like READI Chicago. Try an innovative program model at a scale where we can really test it out and see what works and how we're meeting the needs
I think the role that philanthropy can play, as my colleague Jen was saying, is really as a catalyst. Philanthropy can test new ideas that others can take to scale, like government. But it's not just government, it's not just philanthropy. It is you, it is me, it is all of us having to contribute and find ways that we can use our best assets, our best contributions to help address the problem that I really believe affects all of us. The fact that READI is an initiative for the men at highest risk of gun violence, but it is also a proof point because it is being rigorously evaluated. So we are learning from the lessons of the READI initiative, and we're able to share those lessons across various initiatives, not only in Chicago, but in places throughout the country.
There are many noteworthy causes to support, and we are incredibly grateful to these courageous foundations that believe in our participants and supported READI's rigorous research design. The impact READI is making here has garnered the attention of other organizations that are looking for ways to invest in safety. Chico, how are the lessons coming out of READI informing national understanding of community violence intervention, best practices, and policy and funding decisions?
That's a great question. I had the opportunity over the last 18 months to really go all over the country and work with different cities, states, and counties, helping them understand different models of violence prevention. And one of the gaps we saw was situated around behavior modification, but also the lack of research. The field of violence prevention is really fertile for research. And I believe one of the things READI has to offer is everything we learn, which is tremendous. I know a lot of times we focus on the highlights and the reductions, but it's so much more. Even how we've learned how to engage a community, how to talk to people at the highest risk, how to gain their trust, how to get them interested in the program, how to facilitate and deliver CBI so it's digestible and they're not just regurgitating what we said, but they can own it and feel empowered and be able to utilize it to enhance their life. But more important, what we taught the nation, or what the nation can learn from us, is the need for organizations like READI throughout the country and vulnerable communities, because what READI has proven is that this model works, that utilizing individuals that are credible messengers, that have relationships with people in these vulnerable communities, that can access this hard to reach population that's at the highest risk, works. We're able not only to get them engaged, which is in and of itself a tremendous accomplishment. If you think about, many of these individuals have dropped out of school, been incarcerated, been shot, but they find the energy day after day to come to programming at READI. That says a lot about what READI is doing in our most vulnerable communities in Chicago. But also what we're teaching the country and what they can learn from us is the importance of collecting data, the importance of learning, and lastly, the importance of sharing what you've learned to elevate the entire field of violence prevention. And on a closing note, two things that READI does that set it apart from many other spaces. One thing I love about READI is that we're true partners. READI brings components to existing organization and complement what they do. We don't try and do everything because we understand in this continuum of care that these individuals have unique needs, but there's a plethora of needs as we grapple with all the problems that exist throughout the community. So I think that's one of the major things we can learn about partnership, about collaboration, but also about we must have not only cognitive skills, but sociogenic properties. We have to give individuals, after we change the way they think, something to sustain them and last or keep them going. And that's why it's so important that we couple or partner CBI with job training and wraparound services, because once we deal with the CBI component and the jobs, individuals might have other needs. And I'm just so proud to be a part of the READI family that sees to these individuals and helping them become whole, a whole individual, despite meeting them where they're at through relentless engagement.
Powerfully stated, Chico. Since launching READI, we have been very intentional about engaging long-standing community-based organizations in order to build an ecosystem of support for our participants, their families, and their communities. Brenda, as an early adopter, what are your big takeaways for the future of READI in North Lawndale and beyond? What do you want our audience to take away?
Oh boy, that's a big question. How much time do we have? I really wanted to sort of follow up on a comment that Chico made that, it does require partnerships and community. And I just wanted to give a small example of the network of support that we've created. So during the pandemic, at the height of it, we knew we needed to shift our compensation for the men participating in READI. And many of them didn't have, we were giving out paper checks. But it was through our partnership with Wintrust that we were able to, within a couple of days, make sure that every single person had an account that we could make direct deposits into. That is the power of community and partnership coming together. We have an amazing relationship with Sinai Chicago. So healthcare and education and food from churches. I mean, so it does take a village, to prepare and support these folks. And so for us to be the intermediary and creating that network was really, really important. But what I really want folks to know is we can't afford to not do something. We will lose generations after generations without being really thoughtful about investing in these men. And I am so proud of the data and the partnerships and that we've shown a way forward. What I've learned from my conversations with these young men and with my staff is that they want to work. They want to earn an honest living. There's a lot of stress, hustling, right? But they want sustainable wages that can support them. They want a clear pathway for advancement, because that's important. They want to be treated with respect and, importantly, belonging, because we know what it feels like when you don't belong. And if you don't have a sense of belonging, you won't stay in that job. And then you won't believe, in the process. Right now, we have to get folks to trust us and trust the process. And that's what's happening. So I'm really, proud of that, but it just it can't stop. This is a great 5-year milestone, but this has to become a part of our fabric. It has to become who we are as a society. It's not okay for these young men to be out there and so disconnected. We have a responsibility, and what I love is that we're seeing incredible results and real impact for the work. It's, as you said, Evelyn, it's promising, but I don't even think people thought it could be. And it's more than just a bullet. It takes more than just a job, rather, to address that bullet. I think that's what the other big lesson here is. As a workforce development provider, we always understood that employment was important, but it's all of the other supports and the toolbox that we've talked about that make a difference.
That's great. And I often tell people that, when we started this, there were so many unknowns about, whether we were going to find the men, whether they were going to accept the offer, and whether we were going to be able to serve them. And it really has been incredibly inspiring how many people raised their hands and said, we're in, and we're gonna see how we can make this work. And so I just want to thank all of you for sharing such excellent points. And I hope that our guests today have learned something new about what it takes to create safer communities and silence the gun violence. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions for our experts, so I'd like to transition now into our question and answer portion. Our first question comes from Nicole. Do the men come to READI and ask to participate in this program, or does READI invite the most at-risk men to participate? Chico, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. That's a great question. Typically, when men come into READI voluntarily, it's through a referral of another friend. Mm-hmm. Typically, and to be honest, that's I don't want to say the best way to come in, but it's the most exciting way because they come in with an expectation to succeed, as opposed when we do outreach, we're trying to convince them, encourage them along the way. But when they identify someone who lives in the community who has the same challenges as they have and see them going through this metamorphosis, it gets contagious. They're like, I want some of this, or I want a chance to escape this lifestyle of anxiety, of harm, of victimization, of victimizing, of potentially going back to prison. So it's a gateway. Individuals who come voluntarily is coming for a gateway out of this life of poverty and harm. Whereas when we're doing recruitment, we're more selling or trying to convince individuals to come into this space. And we have to gain their trust. And that's the key, gaining their trust and allowing them to experience what we have to offer. Mm-hmm. And I think either way, once they experience the love that the staff exhibits to them, because it's authentic, because many of our staff live in these communities, know these individuals, either them personally or their families, or went to school that they know. So there's an authenticity with the staff and they have skin in the game. Let's put the staff have stake in the game, because by saving these individuals, they make their own community safer. And so it's more than just a job for the staff. And that's what these individuals see, that they often didn't see in other institutions.
I might just add to that too, that one of the innovations of READI, so Chico said it so well, that there's 3 different referral pathways. One is the community referral pathway, one is through reentry, as Reality said, and the other is through risk assessment. And I think one of the innovations of READI for outreach was actually to include this component of proactive outreach. So you didn't have to wait until something happened and street outreach workers would go to the hospital in the sort of interrupter model. You could have that, but you could also have this proactive outreach where we were able to find men who would be appropriate for the program and go out and try to build a relationship and gain their trust, because so many of the men were disconnected. And I think that's a true innovation of the program.
That's right. So our next viewer wants to know, is there an opportunity for participants to have access to ongoing resources like CBT, counseling, skill development, once they complete the READI program? This is, this is a common question about what happens when the program ends. Is there a cliff? Brenda, Chico, any of you want to answer that?
Well, with NLEN, we say they never really ever go away. We're always going to be there for you. So that's important. I think that's why tying us to an organization like a workforce development partner like NLEN and others can always be there to support the individuals who've completed READI. But the other challenge of it is that it's a capacity issue. Even if you have will and want, but you may not have the capacity to have staff always available to assist them. So that's another question that we're going to have to look at as we move forward. How do we have dedicated individuals who have cared and loved and worked with our READI clients, our participants, and that they're there and that we're always going to be there for them? Because one way or the other, we want to be. It's what does the quality of that engagement look like, though, if we don't necessarily have the capacity and services?
Yeah, you bet. And it's an argument for more funding,
Absolutely.
right? Keeping it going. Yeah, exactly.
You know, and I just have to say this too, Evelyn. You know, I think to Monica's point, what I've enjoyed about READI is that it has allowed us to evolve the model as we've listened and learned from our participants as well as the needs from our staff. We've had lots of opportunity to have input, and I think that that's the reason that there's such a loving kind of connection between all participants and our staff.
So next, Jenny wants to know, what is your relationship with Chicago Cred? Are you working together? And I'm happy to answer that question, Jenny. First of all, Chicago Cred is one of our biggest funders and a key partner from inception. So when we were even designing READI, Chicago Cred has been a leader in the charge for getting more and more investment into READI itself, but into other community violence intervention programs. We're incredibly grateful for that partnership. So that's the relationship. For our last question, can you share what inspires you most about the work? What story from your interactions with participants sticks with you? Okay, everybody, you got 2 seconds to think about the most inspiring thing or story from your interactions that has stuck with you. This is for everybody who wants to go first.
I'll go first. Just with a level of transparency, I'm from one of the communities that we serve. I'm an individual that was at the highest risk. I'm an individual that did experience incarceration. And I'm an individual that had to go through the process of confronting my trauma and rebuilding my life. So I'm obligated to go back to the community and help individuals who are in the same space that I was in. And when they see me, even as we went over to Austin this week, me and one of my colleagues, and they light up because now I'm a doctor, and they say they encouraged because I still come back, I still talk to them, I still take their calls, and I give them hope. And just to see that, they don't realize they give me hope and the fuel to keep going and fighting harder. But I see how hard they trying because I know the struggles in the Austin community because I still have family in Austin and Lawndale, North Lawndale, so I understand their struggles. I know what it's like to be worried about walking to the corner store, or if your child gone to the corner store too long, did something happen to them? And what they wrestle with every day. And to see them saying, you know what, I'm committed to change my life, that means everything to me. That means everything that these young men are coming here to change their life, because they could continue down this path that was leading back to either prison or death, but they made the change. I know we offered the opportunity, but they consciously make a change to come to the program, and that's what inspired me every time I see participants.
Thank you.
I have just the opportunity to share a story that meant something to me. There's a young man who came to us, just like all the rest of our READI clients, with lots of challenges. And he was nearly homeless. And so to see him become stable was really important. And he would talk about that. But what touched me more is he's a father. And he shared how using CBT and CAD not only helped him in terms of dealing with his peers and life, but made him a better father. And that he was able to relate and communicate to his children differently. And his relationship with the mother of the children changed. And so it was so much more than just about this workforce development or outreach experience, but that the quality of his life changed and he wanted to be different for his children and that he felt like he could be.
Yeah.
It's
beautiful.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Monica?
I agree with Chico that anytime I'm able to talk with the participants and hear their stories, it's inspiring because changing is very hard. And we all know that from our individual lives. And we're asking these men to change so many things about the ways in which they interact with their peers and their networks. And that's really humbling and inspiring. I actually always go back to an instance where there was actually a participant who was very active, who was shot and killed. And I had the privilege of meeting his mom. And she had brought her young son, or younger son, the brother of this participant, to St. Agatha's, actually where we were all gathered. And she told me how even though she had a very specific relationship with her son, and as a parent I could really relate to the struggles that she felt as a parent and as a mom, she talked about how she had seen the program really change his life. And so even though his life had ended shorter than it should have or might have otherwise, she talked about how he came home and talked about the future that he envisioned for himself and how she was taking that and sharing that with her young son. And her young son was there looking at this community of individuals that had assembled because of READI Chicago. And I think that watching him watch everybody else, talk about his brother in such a positive light was really inspiring and humbling.
Thank you all for the time, the dedication, the commitment, the true passion for making our communities safer. And while I know that each of us feels a sense of responsibility to end the gun violence in Chicago, that not everybody is able to dedicate their lives to the cause. But there is a place for each of you to bring your support for the cause right now, today. Join us. We need your partnership and your financial support. Your donation will make a difference. It will help provide critical resources that our participants need to be safe, stable, and feel secure. It'll fund our efforts to address the systemic inequities impacting those whose voices have been silenced. So I'm asking you right now to join us as courageous champions of human rights and social justice who believe in the promise of equity and opportunity for all. Please visit the website URL that you see in the chat and on the screen and make a donation. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to the future. And as we close, let's hear from the Chicago Sports Alliance teams about why supporting READI has been important to them.
The Sports Alliance is committed to supporting READI Chicago because we feel it's an impactful solution to help decrease gun violence. It is a program that has shown successful results through measurable, evidence-based data provided by the University of Chicago Crime Lab. We hope the investment from the Sports Alliance will continue to shine a light on programs who are making a difference in reducing gun violence. And we hope it encourages more private and public funding for successful programs like READI Chicago. The Chicago Bears would like to thank READI Chicago staff and participants for their hard work and dedication to making Chicago a better and safer community.
The Chicago Sports Alliance represents what's possible through the power of sports, bringing communities together, building authentic relationships, and supporting community-led solutions. The Chicago Blackhawks are proud to work alongside our sports team partners to direct resources and attention towards such a critical issue facing Chicago. We stand alongside our community leaders as they work tirelessly in their neighborhoods to end gun violence in our city.
As gun violence continues to plague our city, Cubs Charities is extremely grateful to be in its 5th year in our partnership with the Chicago Sports Alliance and our nonprofit partners like READI Chicago that are boots on the ground working to combat the violence in our city, but also to work directly with the young men and women that are part of their programs, treating them with integrity and respect.
The Bulls are dedicated to using its platform to tackle some of Chicago's toughest issues and are grateful for the opportunity to amplify our community efforts through the Chicago Sports Alliance and READI. This unique partnership demonstrates the collaborative approach needed to tackle gun violence in our city and the responsibility of Chicago sports teams to uplift the communities that support them and the organizations working towards a more equitable Chicago.
Chairman Jerry Reinsdorf has said, it's our responsibility to be champions for our city and for our fans who have given us so much. A perfect example of Jerry's commitment is his leadership in the establishment of the Chicago Sports Alliance. The Alliance represents 5 iconic sports franchises standing together, united against the crisis of gun violence that has adversely affected far too many Chicagoans. We're so grateful to the leadership and dedication of our partners and friends at Heartland Alliance and READI Chicago, who are transforming lives on a daily basis through tested, evidence-based programming. The White Sox and the Chicago Sports Alliance remain committed to supporting the amazing work of Heartland Alliance and READI Chicago.